And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the insipid and puerile forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday, finally back in the downtown studio after the Sheridan Wyo Rodeo craziness. I think I mentioned this last week, that when the Wyo Rodeo is going on, you can't do anything. I mean, it's best just to stay home. I mean, or get out of town. Because your
businesses all over town just give up and close the doors and go home.
Well, yeah, they were closed yesterday.
Yeah.
Everybody licking their wounds, I guess. But from all reports, the rodeo went great. The sheriff's report, or the PD report for the weekend is something like 13 pages long, 10 or 13. According to the lovely Christine, there wasn't too many things that were really interesting on there. But anyway, it was a success, and we finally can get back in the doors down here. So on today's show, actually got a pretty good show for you here in just a little bit. David Geralt is going to be joining us. He had an opportunity to talk to Ted Nugent. And so I thought we'd dispense with a little politics for a little bit and talk about the news.
So now we're getting Uncle Ted's sloppy seconds. Is that what it is?
Well, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to ask Mr. Geralt about that.
Now, we'll put a little plaque on the wall.
Yeah, but
we once interviewed the same person that Ted Nugent did.
That's like the Bee Watcher, right? I once interviewed a person who interviewed a person who interviewed a person who spoke to President Trump, or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so David Geralt is joining us on the program now, so we'll talk to him in just a second. Oh, there he is.
That reminds me. Sorry, David, you have to hang off for a sec. I just got in the mail yesterday an 8x10 4-color glossy in his office, the old John F. Kennedy office, John Barrasso, myself, and Nina Weber.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk to Mr. David Geralt. David, welcome to the program this morning.
Hey, good morning, David. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, of course. It's not very often that you get to talk to the Nuge, and so I thought, why the heck not? How did that happen?
Well, I think that he's someone who cares quite a bit about public lands, cares about Wyoming quite a bit, and he's actually paying attention to this race. This is an important race that people not only in D.C. are concerned about, but people who are interested and invested in hunting, fishing, recreating on our public lands. And, of course, the voters across the state of Wyoming are all focused in on. So he kind of found me as the truth.
Really? All right.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So let's first go here. So talk to me about public lands. I mean, we live in Wyoming. 46% of the state is owned by the federal government. There have been some really bad attempts for them to cut off access to millions and millions of acres in Wyoming. Yeah. So how do you think that we ought to best handle those lands? You think maybe the states ought to control that, or you think leave it up to the BLM? What do you think?
I don't think just wholesale leave it up to the BLM. And I do want to start by saying that there's a lot of nuance and it depends on particular parcels, but I'm completely against any wholesale land swap especially coming from unelected bureaucrats in D.C., completely, totally against that. And I believe that the use of our public lands is enshrined in the Constitution. So multi-use principles that tell us that we can use our public lands for responsible energy development, for recreating, for hunting, for fishing, for timber harvest. All that is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. So it's not just some abstract academic theory or anything like that. We know that that's what it's there for. And also, I believe that our public lands are part of our American birthright. If we do want to transfer public lands to private ownership or state ownership, there's already a disposal or a transfer process. And what I'm in favor of is ensuring that those processes are efficient and that they're executed in a timely fashion. So I don't believe that the BLM should wholesale have complete discretion over these transfers. No way. I also don't believe that Washington, D.C. bureaucrats, people who may be well-intentioned but have never even been west of the Mississippi and certainly never to Wyoming, they shouldn't have the final say whatsoever. It should be community involvement, community input first, and community input there at the tail end. So those are my perspectives on public lands.
Yeah, and I don't think that I'm not in favor of just like turning it over or just putting it up for sale. I would never be in favor of that. However, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but one of the biggest problems in Wyoming is that we have a checkerboard of public land, BLM, private land, state trust land. I mean, it's really a mess because sometimes you've got a chunk of private land that's way out in the middle of BLM controlled property. And if they were to do something like the Rock Springs RMP, well, then those people, I mean, they're just screwed. And so, I do think that there's a valid argument to do some land swaps and maybe clear up some of this checkerboard. On the other hand, though, if the checkerboard exists, then in a way that kind of guarantees access to some of those parcels. So I don't think that it's a cut and dried issue by any means.
I completely agree. And I think that's my main point is just it's impossible to have a one size fits all solution when it comes to public lands. And I'm proud to have worked on these things when I was a policy advisor to U.S. Senator Cynthia Lummis. But I've also worked on these issues for other members of Congress, which are that's another reason that I think Ted Nugent came in and said, there's something to this guy. I'm very proud to have earned the endorsements of 6 sitting members of Congress, one of which is likely to become the next chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee. His name is Pete Stauber. So being able to work on these issues and understand the intricacies of saying, yes, where these transfers make sense, let's execute them. And, I had the opportunity to actually work on the Rock Springs RMP, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And when we isolate these parcels of land that are just completely siloed off because of this checkerboard that you're describing, it doesn't make sense, and it restricts access, and it just kind of gives the illusion to the public that, yeah, you can get there. It's technically public. The only thing that you need to access that is your own private helicopter.
Right.
Well, okay, that's not really public. So, again, where these processes are best formulated is from the ground up. So community involvement and working with these BLM offices. When we go into forestry land and working with USDA, there again, community involvement needs to be first. And there are places that are better at this than others. But I think across the entire state of Wyoming, we have to focus on local input. And again, my call here is, as a conservative Republican, I want to limit the federal government's reach into the state of Wyoming. And that is merely a call for more public input and for that input to be taken very seriously. And as the next member of Congress, I intend to have those voices heard and heard loudly in D.C.
All right. Well, I see that you're on the road. Where are you headed to now?
Yeah, we're on the way to Lusk. And, as a quick plug, if you're in Lusk, please come see us. We'll be at Washington Park at 5:30. We're hosting an ice cream social. If you're in Goshen County, tomorrow, on Wednesday, we'll be hosting an ice cream social in Torrington at City Park at 5:30. So if you're in Lusk or if you're in Torrington or if you're in the neighboring counties or anywhere like that, come out, say hi.
And then, of course,
I'm not going to beat you across the head with politics. It's just a meet and greet.
Fair enough. And then, of course, on Thursday, we've got the debate in Casper, which you'll be attending. So we're looking forward to that. All right,
David. All over.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a blast. It's a great venue. By the way, a completely shameless plug. It's our debate's going to start at 5:30 at the Rialto Theater in Casper. It's going to be a great event. Got a cash bar, and it's a nice place, and we've got some good candidates. So see you Thursday, David. Have fun down in Lusk. Avoid the prison.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me on, David. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, that's David Geralt meeting the Nuge. This federal lands issue, I really kind of get sick of the, I guess the real, I want to say like 30,000 foot discussion of it. Well, we can't turn over federal land. Well, the truth is that the federal government doesn't manage federal land very well. And all you have to do is take a walk or a hike into any of the wilderness areas. It was the Clinton roadless rule that created that giant tinderbox that we call the wilderness areas. I mean, Ken, you spend a lot of time in the mountains, or at least you did before you ran for office.
Well,
it's a big mess.
The problem started when we became a state, and rather than ceding all the lands to the state as is supposed to be done, the state agreed to allow the feds to keep all kinds of land. I despise the BLM. I think they do a horrible job.
Oh, they're terrible.
I would like to see them taken out of the mix. I would like to see these federal lands be put in state hands. One of the problems with that is that the state has, and the current leadership in the legislature has, the idea that means we have to make the maximum amount of profit for the schools out of all state lands. So if we were to repossess land that should be Wyoming's initially, and then we'd have some local control over that, there needs to be an understanding that this land is not for sale. This land is our land. Just sound a little bit.
Are you going to break out in song?
Yeah. No, it's our. That's what makes Wyoming Wyoming. You can't go anyplace else in the lower 48, especially, and move around and feel like you got that. So one of the things I love the Bighorn Basin because it is just so wide open.
Oh yeah.
And you can go about anywhere. So that makes it tricky. I'd like to see it put in state hands so that people closer to the people could maintain it, and I don't like the way the BLM operates. I don't particularly like the way the U.S. Forest Service operates, and you want a camping place or something, you have to talk to somebody in Maine. And
right,
that's
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, so the whole thing's a mess, and I'd like to see that corrected, but that does not mean that I want to see land go into private hands. I fought hard against the Kelly parcel.
I think that was a horrible
sale.
decision.
That was stupid. I mean, the argument was, but look at all the money that we could make, and we could use that for the schools.
One time.
Yeah. It's only going to become more valuable. You don't take and sell off good assets.
No, and with federal lands, I think that you hit on what is, I think, the strongest argument for it. That these are public lands, and they always have been public lands. And one of the beautiful things about Wyoming is if you don't own property, you can still go buy a hunting license, and you can still go try to whack an elk. Don't go with me. Evidently, you won't see any elk.
Well, you have to actually get out of the truck.
Well, okay, fair enough. But that's one of the great things about Wyoming is that we do have wide open spaces, and everybody can have their hunting spot, where they call their hunting spot, or their fishing hole, and it's completely open. On the other hand, though, we do have a big checkerboard problem. I don't think that the corner crossing decision by the court was a good one. I don't think that it solves the problem. There are still private property concerns that have to be figured out. And I don't know how you would do this, but if the federal government could retain ownership of those federal lands, but it be in state control, we could manage them. I don't know how that would work out, but maybe that would be a better solution. And then the second thing too is at some point we're going to have to solve the checkerboard problem, and I think the easiest way to do that is with land swaps. But as Mr. Geralt mentioned, you don't want an unelected bureaucrat 2,000 miles away being the arbiter of whether or not you can do a land swap. And so none of this is an easy issue, but I think that there are groups in the state that are using it as a cudgel. That if you even approach the question of doing something around public lands. Well, they're just going to beat you over the head with it, saying they're going to sell it all off. They're going to sell it to the rich people. Which the truth is, even with Mike Lee's proposal, that was not part of it.
Yeah.
It was it was various political groups in the state that created that.
I do understand that fear, though. I grew up here around Sheridan, and it was a very small community. We knew everybody. You knew all the ranchers.
Was being the operative word.
What that?
Was being the operative word.
Yeah. You knew all the local ranchers. Most of them were generational people just like you and me, out there trying to make a living on the land. And now that's changed. And who can blame one of the local families for selling off a big chunk of land for more than they ever hoped to see in their lives,
Sure.
But that creates the issue where you have the haves and the have-nots, and now it becomes like Europe in the time of Robin Hood.
Well, when I lived in Virginia and in Tennessee, I grew up just like you did in the Bighorns.
And nobody grew up just like I did.
Well, whatever.
You had electricity when you grew up.
That's true. We had running water and we didn't have dirt floors. But during the summers, I was always off fishing somewhere, either with Grandpa Dave or by myself. It seemed like every fishing trip we'd go to a new creek or a new fishing hole, and
not see anybody.
And not see anybody.
Yeah.
At all. Now, when I moved to Virginia, that all came to a screeching halt because there is no public land there, and unless you know somebody, you're not going fishing, you're not going hunting, you're not doing anything because it's all private land, and so it's a tremendous resource that we have, one that needs to be protected. But on the other hand, though, it needs to be conserved, not preserved, and there's a big difference between those.
Let me give you an example of what I hate to see happen. And that is the Bighorn River in the Thermopolis area. Word got out that there was some good fish in there. So there's a few miles of some pretty nice.
Oh, yeah, it's a great area.
And if you get up, you go through the reservation and whatever it is you have to do that, and get up into the canyon, you got spectacular scenery, you got good fishing. Well, word got out, and now in the little town of Thermopolis, there are probably 6 or 8 outfitters. That's all they do. And when you look at that river,
it's packed, man.
It really is. I don't even know how you keep a line from tangling up with somebody. It's insane.
I know the last time I went through the canyon, from Thermopolis over to Shoshone.
Yeah.
You're driving along, and you just look down at the river, and it is packed. There's a lot of people.
It's even worse on the Thermop side. There's only so many fish in there. So now they restock it, and you're going to sit out there elbow to elbow with somebody dodging his beer can.
But here's the other part. Any good fisherman knows that you do not go and fish Crazy Woman down in the canyon, because there's about 500 people that are down there doing the exact same thing that you are. You go find some other hole.
True all over the Bighorns until you're willing to walk for an hour or two to get away from people. But even then, if you tell somebody...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, I've seen so many
good
places destroyed over the last 40 years.
As if there aren't 500 other fishing holes. Yeah. And again, that's one of the beautiful things about our public lands. But the other issue, though, is right now, they are not being managed. And you can go anywhere in the Bighorns, and, man, if there's a lightning strike anywhere, it's gonna light on fire, just like the elk fire did, what was it, last year or the year before? Last year. And the reason for that is we haven't done any logging. And that therein lies one of the biggest problems with federal management of public lands, is they are not maintained. And, if you want to create a big, gigantic threat to private property rights or to federal property, leave the feds in control. They've been doing a bang-up job of it. And I saw an article, maybe it was in the Cowboy, but last week, somebody's thinking about allowing chainsaws into wilderness area. Why wouldn't we? Maybe somebody with a chainsaw could clean up all the deadfall that's nothing more than a big pile of matches. So it's not an easy issue to figure out, nor do I think that it's one that we're going to figure out, that any politician is going to figure out. But I do appreciate the conversation, though.
So take electric chainsaws. You can have an electric e-bike in there, can't you?
I
don't know.
I don't know that you can, because it says no motorized travel.
Well,
So
yeah,
I would think that would be
a
motorized.
Anyway.
But anyway, so I do appreciate the debate on it. Just remember that the folks that are screaming loudly about public lands, generally speaking, those aren't the folks that are willing to have the debate about conserving. And let me just explain the difference there. By conserving, I mean responsible use of public resources, right? And a good example of that is Wyoming's wildlife populations. Okay, one year we might issue, just pulling numbers out of the air, 500 permits for an area. Well, maybe there's a big winter kill, or maybe the elk don't breed as much as they did the last year. Well, then we drop the number of permits for that area. We manage the wildlife population, which is exactly the same thing that we need to do with federal lands. Manage them, log them, take care of them. It's no different. And all of us know that you change the oil in your car every couple thousand miles. Why is it that we don't believe the same thing about public lands? That you've got to maintain them, that they require maintenance. And if you don't do that, well, then they're not going to be there, and they're certainly not going to be as pretty as they were before. So great.
You look closely at God's instructions to Adam when he first made us.
Go forth and subdue the earth,
Yeah.
is what he said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, fascinating debate. Just remember that the people that are screaming the loudest about all these public lands, well, generally speaking, they're not looking out for you, or they're not looking out for taking care of the public lands. All right. So you know what, Ken? Let's go ahead and take our first break. I want to get into a subject, but we're not going to have time to finish it before we have to go to break. So we'll do an absolutely amazing profit timeout. Then we'll come back. Are you sick to death of being told what to think? Maybe you don't even realize that it's happening. Freedom Caucus bad, big spending, big government, liberal, Republican good. Conservatives are bad and they want to starve little children. I have heard it all, my friends. We are way past the time when the news was just the news, if it ever was. But wouldn't it be nice if you had a news platform that was at least honest about what they were telling you? News on the news page, opinion on the opinion page. That's exactly what the Open Range Record is. Go to the website, openrangerecord.com. News, analysis, opinion, and investigative journalism. One more time, that website is openrangerecord.com. You can listen and watch Cowboy State Politics live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble every Tuesday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pay attention to all that other block-headed, Borg-like so-called news if you want. But if you want to get the real story, watch Cowboy State Politics live. And now, back to the program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Tuesday.
That was your mute, not mine.
It was. Well, I couldn't figure out how to push the buttons last night.
I
at the
do
debate
sometimes
either.
think this studio needs more mutes.
It does, man. Well, we just need more buttons, more equipment. No, the truth is we do not need more equipment. We got plenty of it in here. Well, anyway, welcome back to the program, my friends. Thank you for joining me. So last night we had a debate here in Sheridan, and it was the county offices debate. So the sheriff, the coroner, and the county clerk. And Well, and we've also had a county commissioners debate, both of which have been, I would say, very well attended. I've been very impressed. And in fact, last night, after everything was done, I said, if you guys wouldn't mind, just give me a minute or two. And I just want to commend you on, being a respectful audience. And I want to commend the candidates for, trying to keep the punches above the belt a little bit. And most of them did that. I say most because there was one that, well, any jab he could get in, he did. But
Well, it's kind of a testament to how old this community is as far as the demographics.
Mhm.
When 100 people show up to watch coroners debate.
That would, honestly, okay, so who would think that a coroner's debate would be entertaining? I wouldn't. In fact, when I was setting up everything, I know nothing about the coroner's office, or at least at that point I didn't. And so I called a friend of mine who is a coroner in another county, and I just asked him, I'm like, hey, I need help. I don't know what questions to ask. And going into it, I kind of thought, man, this is going to be a snoozer. And it wasn't. It was kind of feisty, and it was interesting to watch. And so anyway, last night's debate, it went pretty good. The sheriff's debate was fun. One of the fun parts about it is those two guys. It was Howie Fitzpatrick and Sheriff Dominguez, and they would go back and forth a couple times. And I made sure that there's plenty of time in these debates for some real back and forth if the candidates want to. But in the sheriff's debate, they'd go back and forth a couple times, and then they'd both be like, yeah, we're good. Let's go to the next one. And I mean, a couple of them, and I think this worked out to Howie Fitzpatrick's in his favor. There was one question where he just picked up the mic, he said 2 sentences, and put it back down. And I was like, oh, that was effective. And so the results last night, well, first, let me tell you this. We've received RSVPs from everybody that we've invited. So all of the county candidates from last night and all the legislative candidates for tonight's debate. And so as the moderator, I was led to believe, hey, everybody's showing up. I don't really have to worry about it. Well, in politics, things happen. And they certainly happened yesterday. And one of those is the Sheridan County clerk failed her tabulation machine tests. They didn't go according to plan. She failed them. And they are now rescheduled for Thursday. And so that happened. And then last night, I asked everybody to be at the debate or at the Ramada at 5:30 so that we could have a meeting and we could get everything ironed out. Well, no Sheridan County clerk. And so I gave her until like 1 minute before 6 o'clock. And then I called it. And so what I had written in the debate letter is if your opponent doesn't show up, then I'm giving you half the time that was allowed for the debate to do with as you please. So if I don't know, I won't even mention any names, but if one of the legislative candidates doesn't show up tonight, I don't care who it is. I'm giving the person who does show up 15 minutes, and they can talk for 15 minutes. They can ask questions of the crowd, whatever. Well, last night, I was told everybody's going to be there. Well, the Sheridan County clerk did not show up. And it was, and there was a lot of speculation that maybe that was because of the failed test.
She might have been busy. I don't know.
And that was my concern. Hey, did something happen? Did car trouble?
You
something.
would think a phone call or a text or something might be appropriate.
Well, yeah, especially when it's a public event and,
For the party. This is, and I have to stress this.
Okay, go for it, Ken.
This is the Republican Party candidates at a debate hosted by the Republican Party.
Yep.
This is it, man. All these other
This is all the marbles.
forums and other things that are out there, they pale in comparison, especially when you understand who's behind some of them. And you think, but this is a big deal. And it needs to be well attended. It needs to be watched. If you can't be there and you get an opportunity to go back and watch again, you need to watch these things and understand, or at least get a little bit of feel for who these people are before you just step into the booth and vote for somebody because they have a pretty sign or because somebody whose cousin says they're a nice person.
Right.
Doesn't work that way.
And so let me just talk just for a minute about how these things were put together. I've been moderating. I moderated last night and then the one last week. Tonight, because I happen to know one of the people that's going to be debating, I'm not going to moderate that debate. That wouldn't be right. And then there's another candidate, Mark Jennings, that he's a good friend of mine. He's my pastor. That probably wouldn't be good if I moderated that debate either. And so one of the other precinct men is going to do that one. But I want to tell you...
Well, that's it. I just want to touch on that. Wouldn't be a good thing. The way you have handled these things, you straight out, you make a statement. They can either go from there. It is very neutral.
Yes.
And it actually wouldn't make a difference other than somebody's appearance or somebody who wasn't there hearing that you did that. So I wanted to throw that in. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
You set it up in a very fair fashion. And I understand that even some of the opposition has acknowledged the same. So.
They have. And you know, as a debate moderator, and keep this in mind, there's several debates that are going on across the state. The Open Range Record is sponsoring one on Thursday. But if you're the moderator, your job is to facilitate a discussion, to bring up a topic that creates debate. And so it's not, hey, let's pick on the incumbent time. Let's make a list of all the bad stuff they did and make them defend it. That's not a debate. A debate is about issues. And if there is something that an incumbent has done, okay, well, that's fair game, but that's not the moderator's job. And you know, there's been a lot of forums where, hey, so-and-so, you know, you swapped 81 acres of sagebrush for 80 or 100 acres of sagebrush for 80 acres at the base of Devil's Tower. Can you explain that? Okay, that's not a fair debate question. Even though I mean, it would delight me to know.
I want to hear the answer.
I would love to hear the answer from that, and I wouldn't mention any names, Augie. But that's not a fair debate question. Your job is to bring up a topic and just throw it out there, and it needs to be fair. It needs to be debatable, and all those things. You know, that's your whole job. So the way that you come up with questions, and this is the part that I was really getting to, I think, is that we spent a significant amount of time. By we, I mean myself and a couple other members of the Sheridan County Central Committee. We spent several hours creating questions for or not questions, they're statements, they're debate topics, creating topics for debate. And we would come up with one, or, you know, somebody would suggest one, and all of us would kind of look around and go, you know, that one's not exactly debatable. Or, I see where you're coming from, but that's not exactly fair. Maybe we can write a question or a topic that opens the door for that discussion, which, you know, that happened last night. There was a topic for the sheriff's debate. And I believe the topic was something like, it is the role of the sheriff to protect your Second Amendment rights. And I mean, that's absolutely a truism. That is the job of the sheriff. But it's a good debate topic. And the first speaker on that one was Sheriff Levi Dominguez. And he went on a long discussion about how he supports Second Amendment rights and he loves guns and your right to have them and on and on and on and on. And I thought for sure that the ATF raid in Bighorn was about to come up. I mean, what a perfect opportunity, right? I would have taken it. But his opponent, Howie Fitzpatrick, did not. He chose not to go down there, and I think it worked out well for him. But my point is that the moderator is not the person that brings that up. And so just real quick, and then we're going to move on. But the way this is going to happen tonight is we've written, I think there's close to 25 topics, and we've got 5 different legislative debates tonight. And so all of the topics for all of the debates, all of the House races are all going into one big pot. And I'm going to mix them up. And it doesn't matter if it's Ken's debate or if it's the House 51 debate or House 30. All of the debate topics are coming out of the same pot. Nobody's going to know which one's coming next, including myself or my co-moderator, because I'm not doing all of the debates tonight. So everything is as fair as you could possibly make it. And I hope that if you're in town, you come to the Ramada. Everything's going to kick off at 6 o'clock. We'll have a prayer and the pledge. and then we'll get going. But we've got a big room. I don't know how many seats are in there, but there's several. There's plenty of room for everybody that wants to see this. So 6 o'clock at the Ramada, we're going to have a whole bunch of legislative debates. Are you excited, Ken?
I'm bringing popcorn.
Are you? Oh, maybe I should bring a popcorn machine.
No, I am excited because I've had to, for years, endure these mindless forums where they go up and they give you a minute and a half or 2 minutes to explain what's wrong with the budget.
Yeah.
You know, and or as you said, they'll pick a question that is very pointed in directing you. There's a comment, by the way, from one of the listeners about that's exactly what happened at the Sweetwater County Forum, and you can hear the bias in the questions, and it's true here.
It's just wrong.
There. And this is one where you just state a topic and you get to go at it.
Yeah.
And you get to respond adequately rather than, okay, you got 15 to 30 seconds to respond.
That's not even fair, right? You can have 10 seconds to respond.
Yeah, you can't even tell a good joke in that time.
No. The other thing that I've decided to do, and this is in the debate letter. And by the way, what I did is I wrote a detailed letter to all of the candidates ahead of time saying, this is how things are going to run. So all the candidates know the format, everything. There's really no surprises. Maybe there'll be a curveball. But one other thing I've decided to do, and we've done this for all the debates, is so for Ken's race, for example, at any point during the debate, which by debate I mean during Ken's time up there, okay, so probably going to have 3 topics, probably won't have time for any more than 3. So at any point during those 3 topics, I've given them 1 minute to use whenever they want. And so if you've already said your last speech and your opponent is saying something, you're like, man, I wish I could respond to that. Well, you get 1 chance to do that. And you get 1 minute, and all you got to do is flag me ahead of time, and I'll say, okay, there's your 1 minute.
But I think it should be more like 3 because 1 minute's not enough for a potty break.
I am tired of being told how to run my debate.
So I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
That's all right. That's all right. Go ahead.
But that's what makes you qualified to set this up and to decide how it runs? Why? We've not seen this. This isn't how things are usually done. What's your qualifications? Why are you doing it this way?
Okay, I think that's a good question.
I do too.
So I paid for my college with speech and debate, and I had an outstanding record in high school, win-loss record. I think it was like 154 wins and like 20 or 30 losses. And then I went to college, and I won 3 national speech and debate championships. And then in addition to that, I have probably judged and moderated, I don't know, probably 1,000 different debates. I've been a parliamentarian for Student Congress at the high school national debate tournament. I've been the parliamentarian, the guy running the whole show. I know what makes a good debate, and I know what makes a crappy one. And so why is this different than other mindless forums that you see? Well, it doesn't do the voters any good or the audience any good if it's just, hey, give me your thoughts on taxes, and then we move on to the next topic. Tell me what you think of public lands. Okay, so there's no back and forth there. And to find out what a candidate believes, they have to be challenged. And they have to be able to defend their position. Because that's how they're going to respond when they get to the job that you're electing them for. And if you haven't been forced to defend your position and to ask good questions, why should I assume that you're going to do that for me when you get down there? Well, I shouldn't. And so the reason why you have back and forth and you give time for responses is you want the argument to develop. You want to see how people respond under pressure. Because, Ken, I think you can agree with me on this, that when you get to that floor, there's a heck of a lot of pressure from all different angles. Vote this way. Vote for my bill. Vote for your bill. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. And you got to be able to know we have to be able to know that you can defend our position.
You have to be able to stand on principle, and you have to be able to articulate an idea that is convincing. So what I like about this, as opposed to a forum, is at a forum somebody can stand up and say something like, "I'm for an economy that rewards hard work."
Well, I think everybody
Well,
is. Well, unless you're a
What the
socialist.
hell does that mean? And if somebody were to say something like that tonight, I can go back and question. Well, what do you mean by that? Let's dig into that. Words mean things. Are you advocating now? Let's say somebody says healthcare that meets us where we are.
I don't know what that means.
I know what it means, but they're not going to say we want Obamacare. We want
Medicaid
we want a
expansion.
single-payer healthcare system.
No, and that's what you have to be able to do. And thus far, I don't think that any of the candidates in any of the 2 nights of debates that we have had, I haven't seen any of them turn to their opponent and say, "Okay, you just said this. What does this mean? I want to know." I haven't seen anybody do that, and I hope that it comes up tonight. And okay, so
that's a great question. Right
okay, so go ahead and put that on the screen. I got it up there. Okay, so how do you deal with non-answers? Okay, so the job of the moderator is not to make the arguments for the candidates, and so the way to when the debate is happening, that's up to the candidates. It's not my job to push or prod or to do anything. I want to see if my guy or the other candidate is going to pick up on it.
And the audiences are savvy.
Oh, yes, they are.
They get it. You go in there and you don't answer somebody's question, or you pivot and try to squirt out of the issue. People know it.
Okay, so let me answer Patrick's, and put Patrick's question back up there if you would, Ken. So let me answer this directly. During the debate, it's not the moderator's job to handle non-questions. That's the candidate's job. If your opponent doesn't answer the question, you should turn around and say, "Well, my opponent didn't give you an answer. Let me give you one." But as the moderator, here's what you do. At the end of the debate, you conduct a straw poll, and you say, "These are the things that I want you to pay attention to." And, well, I do this in the beginning of the debate. I say, at the end, we're going to have a straw poll, and these are the things that I want you to evaluate. Did they answer the topic? Did they respond to their opponent? Did they defend their own position? And just, when you're voting in this straw poll, those are the 3 things that I want you to pay attention to. And so that's how you handle non-answers. And again, I understand that this is a new format for everybody. But frankly, I think at this point, everybody's kind of got the feel of it. And I haven't really received that much negative feedback. And so I'm really happy how things have turned out. I'm very proud of the crowd for, how they've reacted. I haven't heard any heckling or anything like that. So everything's gone good. And the candidates have done well. And by the way, after the straw poll last night for one of the debates, the number one thing I heard walking around the crowd was, "Man, that guy didn't answer the questions. He talked about everything else except for the topic." And so, like you said, Ken, audiences are savvy. People are really intelligent, and they can see what's happening up at the front of the room. So anyway, let's move on. We got about 15 minutes before Representative John Baer, chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, is going to join us at the top of the hour. So let's see here. Yeah. So this is where I want to go. So there's a piece from Dave Simpson and the Cowboy. And this guy's like the lone conservative. Him and, well, I guess he's one of the 2 conservatives at the Cowboy. Him and Jonathan Lang. But Dave Simpson has a piece out, and it's entitled "The Democrats Double Down on Crazy." And he says, quote, "Turns out even choppier waters lie ahead for our Democratic friends, whose pollsters tell us belong to the party that went to college. You'd think it would be smooth sailing for these educated folks who are so much smarter than we are." Now, don't believe that they're smart.
How arrogant is that?
It is, man. You'd think that these smooth sailing for these educated folks who are so much smarter than we are. Now, don't believe that they're smarter than we are? Well, you just haven't been paying attention. Ask them. Tell them how dumb we are and how smart they are. Trust me, I've lived long enough with these people for decades. This past week, it went from bad to worse for the party that went to college. As far-left crazies from the lunatic fringe of the Democrat Party elected lots of socialist-leaning candidates in primary elections across the country, taking full advantage of the metastatic Trump derangement syndrome, they doubled down on wacky. We knew the extreme faction of the party wants to end law enforcement, close prisons, and return to the days of Joe Biden throwing our borders open to any and all who wanted to come. And he says, in a column last week, I was accused of being the latter-day Joe McCarthy, seeing communists under every bed and being unaware of how comparatively crime-free our nation has become in this era of Brian Kohlenberg, Luigi Mangione, and Tyler Robinson. The truth is, and I think that Dave Simpson's point is well taken, that our friends on the other side really have gone off of the proverbial rail in advocating policies that no sane person would agree on. But the reason why you hear all these socialist candidates saying crazy things like get rid of prisons or just open up the borders is they think that they've had success. And when you're a socialist or a communist, whichever, socialism is just a pit stop on the way to communism. But when you've had some success, i.e., you win the mayorship of America's largest city, well, you think that gives you a mandate to say, well, all people want socialism, and if they say that they don't, they just haven't experienced the warmth of collectivism, as Mom Donnie would say. And so they run socialist candidates in all the elections in places where they'd be most likely to be successful, like Colorado. And the other part of this is, generally speaking, we have a pretty uninformed populace. And in many cases, we're verging on a misinformed populace. Rush Limbaugh always called them the low information voter. Because, and I'm not saying anything negative. What I am saying, however, is most people are too damned busy running their own life to worry about what politicians are doing. Now, there's positives and negatives to that. The positive is they're prosecuting their own lives. They're going to their jobs. They're being productive, providing for their own families, which is what we should all do. But that also means that they're not paying attention to what the people that are crafting the policy that they're going to have to live by, and in many cases pay, they're not paying attention to those. And so the folks that come out and in the nice suit and they're very fluent in the things that they say and they're very persuasive, well, the sophists were pretty persuasive before they forced Socrates to drink poison. Those were the people that persuaded everybody to kill off one of their brightest minds. So be very aware of what's happening. Now, how do we educate the populace? Well, that's our job, right? That's the media's job, or at least it ought to be. That's the candidate's job, to go door to door and to talk to folks. Now, if you're running for a statewide office, you cannot knock on everybody's door. That's just not going to happen.
I don't think you can do it in the Senate campaign.
Well, I'm sure you would be trying.
You'd have to start way earlier than most of us have the opportunity.
A year ahead of time. Yeah. So what do? Well, you hold town halls, you attend debates, you make yourself available. You try to be as active as possible on social media so you can respond to people and try to educate them on the things that are happening. But John Adams said that this republic is not suitable, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's not suitable for anything less than an educated and a profoundly religious people. That if you're not educated about your candidate or the candidates, you're going to make the wrong choice. And we're not, and it fries me that some people don't vote. I mean, half of the people that are eligible to vote in this state aren't even registered. And of those people that actually registered to vote, only half of those actually go to the polls. And so really, in any Wyoming election, you're only looking at best 25% of the voting population. That's a really small number.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about a legislative race, most of the time you don't see any more votes than 2,000 votes. And there's a lot more people that live in a district. In a House district, there's 10,000 people.
Yeah.
And when the election returns come in, maybe you've got 2,000 people. On a good day, maybe you get 3.
I pulled 3 last time.
Yeah.
But there's another factor here locally that I just want to touch on. I don't want to derail anything you've already said.
No, go right ahead.
But there is conventional wisdom.
The conventional
in Cheyenne.
wisdom. Yeah.
And so when we come along and we propose doing things in another way because we don't like the way things have been done for the last 40 or 50 years and we want to change it, well, you don't understand how things get done in Cheyenne. You're just a bunch of idiots. You're not properly educated. You haven't been indoctrinated to be able to do things down here. You just listen to me and I'll help make you successful.
That was a good Steve Harshman impression.
Yeah, well, not really, but
well, and let me give you a really easy example. So we decide we're going to do these debates. I propose a format. Hey, we should do it this way. This will work out great. Trust me. The amount of pushback I got was absolutely crazy. And it was from our people, too. A lot of it was. And I just stopped answering questions online. I answered a few of them, and I eventually was like, you know what? These people can just wait and see that this thing was going to work. And all the people, even some of my most ardent critics, after the first round of debates, came up to me and said, you know what, David? That was very fair. This worked out really good. Well, thanks. I'm glad you saw it my way.
I hope they said it worked out really well.
They did. I mean, even Gail Simmons came up to me. Gail Simmons, of all people. She came up, and she was very complimentary, to her credit.
Maybe you better rethink yourself.
Yeah, maybe I better be looking for a sharp thing. Where was it? Anyway, people are very resistant. Voters in general, citizens in general, are very resistant to change.
We are resistant to change. And that's one of the things that I advocate for when people say, all of our kids are leaving the state. I left the state. Mm-hmm. I went and lived different places. And the one thing I learned was I love it back home.
You learned that very quickly, didn't you?
But I got an idea about there are other ways to do things than what I've seen, and there are pros and cons to that. And you don't know what you don't know.
The truth is, when you look at the numbers, Ken, and this isn't true of every town, but most towns in Wyoming, if you look at the population numbers, you're like census over census, they're largely the same. The population of Wyoming really has not changed appreciably in the last 20, 30, 40 years. It's pretty much the same amount of people.
It is aging, the same amount of people.
Sure.
The demographics are changing slightly, and that might be a little bit disturbing.
See, okay, let me argue with that a little bit. So
why do you think I brought it up?
Well, good point, right? So, yes, populations age, but for the population to remain the same, that would mean that you would have to have people staying there or moving in because people die off, people are born, and the truth is, if you look at our population numbers from the 1999, 2000 census and compare them to the last one, they're pretty much the same. This whole argument of, our young people are leaving the state, in the words of Andrew Byron, one of the biggest redcoats in the legislature, good, because that they have to get experience. And the idea is that you grow up in a good place, you learn your Wyoming values, and then you go off and you seek your fortune elsewhere. And like Ken said, the very first thing you're going to realize is, man, Wyoming's a good place to live. I'm going back.
Kids are restless. Look at the story of the prodigal son.
Sure.
And how good he had it. But he wanted to go out and see the world. Kids do that. That's natural.
That's a good thing.
And what they never tell you in these, and I've seen couple of studies now that show that the number of people, once they get into their 30s, they get established, they make a good income, they settle down a little bit, they turn around and say, I want to be back home.
Yes.
And we never see the measurement of people coming back to the state after having been gone. I'm one of them.
And so the argument that we always hear is simply, our young people are leaving the state. They're finding jobs elsewhere. We need to keep jobs here. Okay, fine, great. But a large percentage of them are going to seek their fortunes elsewhere. They're going to move to places like Virginia. God help you. Talk to me if you're thinking about moving to Virginia. I'll fill you in on a couple of things.
Nice place, but I wouldn't want to live there.
Nice place. Beautiful motorcycle riding scenery. I'll just tell you, we got a few minutes here. To move from Wyoming to Virginia, I got a 20% raise. 20%. And I thought, man, that's a pretty good raise. I think I should take advantage of that. That's amazing. And for me, a 20% raise was a huge jump. When I got there, I realized that I actually took home less money because of the taxes.
Spending power went to poo.
Yeah, my spending power went to giant flaming piles of poo. So, yeah, I think that it's absolutely a good thing that our young people go out, see the world. But what they're going to find out is that there is a reason why your parents chose to raise you here. And it's a good place to raise a family. There's very little crime. Unless the redcoats get in power again, there's a large amount of freedom. They'll start chipping away at that. But Wyoming is an amazing place to live. And when you move elsewhere, you find out very quickly. I distinctly remember a phone call with my old man saying, after I'd been there like a month, and I told him, I am moving home. And he said, the hell you are. He said, you made your choice. You're staying there. Yeah. I know I'm talking to a 25-year-old man, but you need to experience that.
I lived outside of the state because Uncle Sam told me where to live for 10 years.
Sure.
And sent me all over the world. And after seeing Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Kuwait, Wyoming looked pretty damn good.
I bet it did. All right, so let's go ahead and take our second break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Mr. John Baer, Representative John Baer. We'll be back in a minute. The calendar says that it's summer, and you believe it. Well, that's just so cute. But you obviously haven't lived here very long, have you? And you probably think that the weather is just going to continue to warm up. You don't have to worry about snow or ice or 30-degree temperatures anymore. In case you've forgotten, this is Wyoming, my friend, and that sort of thinking doesn't work here. 1 minute, it could be 75 and sunny, and 10 minutes later, snow. Whatever the weather, you need a pair of socks that'll keep your feet cool and dry even on the hottest of summer days. And if you happen to run into that spring snowstorm, you'll stay nice and toasty warm. Well, your feet anyway. To get you a pair, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. These are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia.
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell. Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the last year and a half been more than you could bear? Well, if it has, you've come to the right place. Call my friend Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
You've been watching Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm your host, David Iverson, Wyoming's big voice on the right. Over 100,000 views last month, over 500,000 views already this year. Thank you for watching the program, my friends. Thank you for everything you do for Cowboy State Politics. And by the way, you can listen to the podcast, which is broadcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday morning. And you can find it pretty much everywhere you find your podcasts. Cowboy State Politics Live, YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. So pretty much everywhere. You don't have to look very hard to find Cowboy State Politics.
Yeah, thanks to all of you, and thanks, Mom.
Yeah, thanks, Mom. I really appreciate you logging onto the program 100,000 times. That was great. I know it took a long time. All right, so we're joined by Representative John Baer, Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. John, welcome to the program.
Well, it's so good to be back here with you, David and Ken. I appreciate so much what you guys do, and looking forward to an opportunity to talk to your audience.
Yes, well, I'm glad you could join us. I know you're busy. Lots of things happening in Campbell County. Why don't you tell me about a few of them? What's going on in your campaign?
Well, campaign-wise, it's pretty interesting. Having been the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, I guess I'm a high-value target because AFP is spending a lot of money against me, as well as a group called the Freedom Forward Alliance. It's dark money, so you can't tell really where it's coming from, but my research says it's the Democrat Party. So
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
Anything that sounds good is the Democrats.
Yeah. Well, we're getting the ire of the Democrats, I must be doing the right thing. So I'll just wear that as a badge of honor, and we'll just go to battle with them. A little difficult. They're telling a lot of lies and stretching the meaning of bills and votes, but we're not surprised by that in an election year. So we're combating all of that.
Well, and that's, one of the flyers or mailers that AFP sent around. I've actually got a piece that's pretty close to being ready to publish, was about House Joint Resolution 3. And I'm sure you got one of those. I know Abby did, and a couple of others across the state. Ken did. And that one was simply to change the Constitution to allow a vote on the storage of nuclear waste in the state. But you guys are they accuse you of all sorts of fun stuff, voting against energy and voting against people, and why do you hate little children, and why would you want everybody to be able to kick a dog? I mean, I think I pretty much hit them all.
Yeah. Well, if there's anything bad, that's what they're ascribing to the Freedom Caucus, and I think the people can see through that. What would motivate these people to fight so hard to get conservatives out of office? My guess is that they'd like to have the power back, and they'd like it to be untransparent. We tend to talk to the people about what's going on out there, and so you've seen years now of a lot more light being shed on what happens in the legislature, and thanks to your show as well for that. But as we continue to do that, it has eroded their power and their ability to get things done. And I think the biggest thing that they're missing is their opportunity to advance welfare for the wealthy and the well-connected. And so that is what they fear the most, is that their gravy train could come to an end if people like Ken and I continue to fight for the people of Wyoming.
Well, and one good example of that is the Wyoming Business Council. It seems to me, and maybe I have a different perspective than you guys do, but it seems to me like every project that pops up that I see WBC attached to, it is another one where we're giving away taxpayer dollars that get misused. I mean, we've got a big piece on the Open Range Record right now about a brewery over in Alpine. And really, when you boil it all down, $4.5 million was used, and they didn't really create the business, and now it's up for sale for $10 million. I mean, that's not the job of the Wyoming Business Council or the legislature, for that matter, to give welfare to people who already have piles of cash.
I'll give you another similar example. Down in Rock Springs, there's an old bank building that they wanted to refurbish. They put $5 million into it, damaged some of the buildings around it while they repaired that building's foundation. And now that they've got it halfway done, the windows and doors are all boarded up, they're selling it for about $1 million. And whoever buys it is going to have to put a couple million in to get the thing really to where it can be used. So $5 million of your taxpayer dollars. During one of our meetings, we had a gentleman from Rock Springs advocating for the Wyoming Business Council and funding for airports, which you could argue airport funding is potentially a proper use of government funds.
So,
but
probably.
But I asked the gentleman, would he have been able to make better use of that $5 million at the Rock Springs Airport than what is happening downtown? So when it comes to the Wyoming Business Council, really a lot of bad decisions. And I think that comes from an issue where there's just too much money floating around and it's too easy to hand it out and not make good decisions along the way. And so again, this welfare for the wealthy and well-connected is really what we're looking at. And I would say there's a real illustration during this campaign season too. If you look at the what is it? It's the Wyoming Mining Association.
Yeah.
They are endorsing some of the most left candidates out there. And the question is, why would they do that? Because their constituency are the trona mines and the coal mines and things like that. Well, if you just look at their behavior over the last several years, probably the last 8 years, they've been very supportive of Mark Gordon's decarbonizing the West. And by that, I mean any money that was spent on coal was spent for carbon sequestration, which only adds to the cost of coal. And so when we push back on that, we would expect the Wyoming Mining Association to assist us in pushing back on this woke energy policy. And yet their response is, no, we've got to go with the governor. I guess they suppose that their endorsement dollars go further with trying to influence the governor than they do with the people that are being representatives of the people.
All right, let me ask you about one of those bills about carbon sequestration or getting carbon. This is one that you guys have been trying to get repealed for a couple of years. It was.
Let me guess. House Bill 200 from 2020.
There you go. So first question, John, and we've talked about this on the program, but why don't you tell my audience what that bill is, and then we'll talk about some of your efforts to get it repealed.
Well, the EPA really was the spear point of the war against coal. And so during the Biden administration and even back to the Obama administration, many elected officials and representatives in the state of Wyoming believe that, well, the best thing we could do to protect coal would be to get in front of the EPA, make sure it's our agency that is putting the regulations and managing the regulations on the coal industry. Well, to do that, they decided that our power plants in Wyoming should have stricter regulations than what the rest of the nation has. And so they did exactly that. They put restrictions on coal-fired power plants in Wyoming, saying you need to come up with a plan to sequester, to capture all of your carbon and sequester that. Well, there really hasn't been any science that supports that working. And so what has happened is, so what has happened is they have been allowed to increase our rates. Every Wyomingite is paying more for their electricity, especially the inexpensive coal-fired energy, than they should have to, because these power companies have been able to collect money from the ratepayers to invest in a plan to eventually do something that's only going to make coal more expensive. Now, if you look at what it takes to do that, to remove the carbon from the exhaust and then put it underground, it actually takes about a third of the power that they're generating to do that. So there's probably a 50% increase in your cost. And then on top of that, the whole effort is more expensive. Besides losing the power, you have to do all these extra steps. You're just typical regulation. It reduces the efficiency and increases the cost. And who's paying for that? The ratepayers. So we've been fighting that for years now, trying to get that repealed. And the lobbyists for the Wyoming Mining Association have not come alongside us in repealing that, which means, in my mind, they're basically helping with the war on coal, which from the Trump administration, that's coming to an end. They're actually putting money toward new coal-fired power plants and shoring up coal mines and making sure that the industry is more vibrant than it has been in years, after the previous administrations have tried to tear it down and weaken it. And so here we have the Trump administration strengthening the industry, which helps my county and my district greatly. And we are still going the other direction with this law. And we keep trying to get that passed. We've gotten it passed in the House, and the Senate blocked us. And of course, no help from the Wyoming Mining Association.
Well, and that whole thing, to me, and I don't know why I had forgotten about that, but when I remembered it, I was like, I cannot believe that the Wyoming legislature passed a law that is stricter than the federal guidelines and that would directly increase the price of energy for Wyoming citizens. And our legislature did that. And the folks that are supporting Mark Gordon and some of the incumbents in the Senate, they're the people that are saying, no, we have to keep this. Hold on, Ken wants to talk.
You didn't see an AFP flyer about
No.
how those people were trying to choke business in Wyoming. You know, they
won't touch that.
The hypocrisy is just astounding.
Yeah. And all right. So that covers that one. So I guess we haven't had you on for a while. So let's just kind of run you through the paces, John. So you're running for re-election. If you win, what do you want to do? Any bills you want to do, or what's the plan?
Yes. I want to see us continue working on tax reduction and tax reform. And, there's opportunities to reduce the burden on homeowners still, while funding government and all of the services that government should be providing. There's opportunities to really reduce some of the waste, fraud, and abuse in government. And I think what we just mentioned about the Wyoming Business Council, we really need to get it made clear to the bureaucracy exactly what the role of government is. I think we've got to do some things about data centers. There's going to be some interesting things happen there that are going to affect a lot of our citizens, and they're concerned. And I think the legislature really needs to step up and protect the homeowners that are going to be near these things, the landowners, the ranchers, those people who use our water, and the ratepayers most of all. We don't want our rates to go up just because a new business comes in and provides a few jobs. So we've got to make sure that anything that they bring in, any costs, any detriment to our society are mitigated entirely by those industries. And so that's going to take some real work on the legislature's part. But also, I think there's opportunities to shore up our election integrity even further. I think we need to eliminate ballot drop boxes. We have a couple of counties that still allow that, and ballot harvesting, which is still legal in the state of Wyoming. And I don't think the people of Wyoming are very interested in that at all. So we have opportunities to clean that up. We still have a very low participation rate in our citizens that are eligible to vote versus those who do vote. And I think that the one thing the legislature can do is just make sure that every vote counts. And so that's an effort I'd like to get behind.
Now, let me ask you a question. You mentioned, working on taxes. So as I recall, you gave several speeches on, Senate File 69, the 25% reduction in residential property taxes. We've got a ballot initiative in November, and my guess is that thing's going to pass, and that's a 50% reduction. So what are you guys going to do? I mean, certainly, I don't think we can reduce taxes 75%. I would love to see that. But what's the plan to meld state policy with that ballot initiative? Have you guys thought about that?
I have, and I'll tell you, first of all, it wouldn't be 75% because the 50% initiative that'll be on the ballot in November does not include the land. And so it is not as impactful as the 25% and the 50% for long-term homeowners. And so should that pass, I think that there probably needs to be an effort to ensure that, these different tax reliefs don't just stack on top of each other, but there's probably an opportunity for some of them to be combined. And so I like the way it is now, where citizens, there's a few citizens that actually want to pay more in taxes, and they don't have to take advantage of those exemptions. So I think that's the rare case. I think we need to make it easier for taxpayers to take advantage of those things. And I think you're right. The war in Iran has really put a pinch on people's pocketbooks. And something I'd like to say about the dichotomy of the two different factions that are running for office this year. If I could put it in just short terms as to what the difference is, I think there's one group which typically in a negative manner is called Freedom Caucus, and they're not all Freedom Caucus members, but that derided group is more concerned about the individual's checkbook, whereas the other side is more concerned about the government's checkbook. And you'll hear them as we talk about this tax relief and the ballot initiative, that they have huge concerns. My opponent has stated it publicly, that he has huge concerns that education funding is going to be in jeopardy, and local governments are going to be in jeopardy. Well, we've got a 25% tax reduction. We've had it for 2 years, and I've yet to see a building burned down because the fire department didn't show up because of the 25% property tax relief. Now, as we go deeper, we're going to have to look at prioritizing what we spend money on, and I welcome that. Ken and I worked very hard trying to make some priorities across the government spending in the state of Wyoming in the last budget session. And we did what we could. I think mostly it ended up being a pressure to keep us from growing government as much as we would have. But there are still opportunities to reprioritize.
Now, it's interesting you brought up your opponent, and you said that he announced publicly that he's against these things. I would like to ask, where did he announce these? Because he certainly doesn't show up at debates. I think that he would not show up at other public appearances too.
Well, he didn't show up at the Grand Old Party or the Republican debates. He did show up at the League of Women Voters debate, and we know that they're a partisan. That's a partisan group that has fought every effort for election integrity, which is an 80-20 issue, by the way. 80% of Wyomingites want more election integrity, but the League of Women Voters certainly is champions for the other 20%, which is mostly Democrat. I think if you look at the issues that the League of Women Voters champions, they're all Democrat issues. And what they oppose are all Republican issues. And so my opponent was comfortable going to their forum and speaking, and that's where he stated that he's concerned about tax relief being a problem for the government. And then he didn't show up at the Republican debate, which is where we talk about things like limited government, lower taxes, freedom in the way of free markets. And that's one of the things I'd love to discuss with you, David, is there's a huge push within the state of Wyoming and across the United States to get away from free markets. Yes. And when you look at the kinds of people that are being elected, you have Mamdani in New York, you have this gal down in Colorado that just got nominated, and then that guy in Maine with all the Nazi tattoos.
Yeah, he's got a problem.
and think about the fact that the Wyoming Democrat Party did not distance themselves from those people when they had an opportunity. And so this is an embracement of socialism, and I would say communism. And so these are the kind of things that will destroy the American dream, the American middle class, the American nuclear family. And those are things that the party is diametrically opposed to, as am I.
I cannot count the amount of times that Josh Durrell, the head of the Wyoming Business Council, has said that free markets don't exist, or the free market is working against us, is what he says. That he says it's just this ivory tower idea.
Well, it certainly is working against him.
Well, yeah,
because he believes that businesses can only survive and should only survive with government assistance. Well, Ken often says, with the shekels come the shackles, right? So if our government is deciding who's going to get help from the taxpayer, eventually they're going to be deciding who's going to manufacture what. Well, what is that system called?
I've got a word for it. Yeah. And the point I was going to make is that I don't think that there is any argument that Josh Durrell can make to get away from what he said on this program in front of you guys. That the free market, that's just an old and antiquated idea. I don't think that he can get away from that. And he said it so many times that there are very few people that could even argue that they are not aware of that. And so everybody that supports the Wyoming Business Council and is in opposition to, defunding them or dismantling them entirely, absolutely, they're in favor of that ideology, that it's welfare for the well-connected, it's taxpayer dollars going to all these dubious projects, and that they are absolutely in favor of private business. I mean, John, you're a business person. You understand the problems with this, that private business has to compete with government. And, I mean, it's no more complicated than that.
So,
well, it's affecting housing, which is something that I think, the left has made a big deal out of, and maybe for good reason. But they've made a big deal out of it because they'd like the government more involved with housing. But if you're a builder or a developer and you have to compete with the government, your opportunity for profit is down. And so there are fewer builders, fewer developers, and we see less opportunity for housing to be affordable for everybody. And instead, it's going to be housing affordable for a few people that the government chooses to provide that for. And the rest of us are going to have less money in our pocket because it was taken from us to fund somebody else's housing. And I think that is antithetical wrong to the American way. And I'll always fight against that. So that's the problem that I see coming. And far too many Americans are not willing to fight against that. And the idea that we should just all get along means that the good old boys, the Liz Cheney Republicans that have advanced these government-controlled business opportunities, they're going to be able to continue growing that and take us further down this socialist path, if you will. And I don't think that's alarmist at all when you see what's happening in New York and Colorado and in Maine and California, for that matter. These are very Marxist ideas. And when you look at the methods that they're advancing their ideas, they're using Saul Alinsky tactics to do that. When you have protests that are mostly peaceful, but buildings are burning, that's Saul Alinsky in a nutshell. And so that's what we're up against. And I'm sorry, I think every American has got to stand up and fight for what has made America great. I mean, can you believe that half of this country thinks that the phrase "Make America Great Again" is a pejorative?
Yeah,
that's crazy. We should all want that, and I think that it's really another Saul Alinsky thing is that the minority can make themselves look bigger than they are just by being loud and screaming and using his tactics. And I think that when I look at the 4th of July and the patriotism and the spirit of love for America, I think that there's still an opportunity for a renaissance of a great America. And so I'm going to always fight for that. And I hope that others will join me. I know Ken is in this fight with me, and you are with your effort here. But we have Republicans, and I'll use air quotes on that phrase, that are running for office today that are advancing ideas that will lead to more socialism and more dependence on the government. And that is the last thing we should do. It was Ronald Reagan that says some of the worst words to ever hear in the vocabulary is "I'm from the government, I'm here to help." And so we need to really constrict government's growth and ensure that we're only funding the things that are the proper role of government, things that like firefighting and police. I think government can provide justice and peace, but we can't provide a level of living for everybody. When we allow a free economy and a free market, everybody does better.
Yeah, I agree.
You can't deny that the poorest people in America are rich by world standards.
Absolutely. Ken wants to jump in here.
Yeah, John, you kind of at the end of that swerved back into where I wanted to go from the beginning, which is, the Wyoming GOP platform says that no man has a right to the fruit of another man's labor. And this redistribution of wealth idea, we have this brilliant idea called the Wyoming Energy Dominance Fund.
Oh, boy.
And to me, that's nothing more than Wyoming Business Council 2.0. I tried to cut, and I know I believe you voted with me. I tried to cut the grants out of that and blunt it a little bit.
Make it
So
just
you know,
loans.
if you got to do something, make it a loan and not just outright hand of money. But I would like for you to talk a little bit about this Wyoming Energy Dominance Fund and how do we extricate ourselves from where we're at?
Well, it's an important question. How do we extricate ourselves from where we're at? Because right now we have in several industries and some of these wealthy and well-connected people that are absolutely dependent on tax dollars going their way. And so will immediately cutting off those funds hurt industries and hurt workers? It could. So we've got to pay attention as we do that. But this is un-American. This is, completely antithetical to free markets, and we have to try to reduce it every chance we get. The Energy Dominance Fund, I would put it in a different light. I would say it was a Mark Gordon slush fund, just like the previous energy matching funds. And what were those funds used for? They were used to advance his carbon negative Wyoming policies and decarbonizing the West policies. They were used to give millions of dollars to Bill Gates, of all people, for wind energy. And so that type of misuse of taxpayer dollars has to come to an end. And I did fight with you on that. I tried to reduce the amount of that 3 different times on 3 different readings and try to constrict it as well. Those kinds of things have to come to an end. I agree.
But John, it sounds so great. It's Wyoming energy dominance. But the truth is that it ends up being that it is just welfare for the well-connected, that it is nothing more than giving hundreds of millions of dollars to companies that they don't really, they don't need the money. They don't, they have the cash in reserves, but instead what we're doing is just shelling out taxpayer dollars to companies that already have the cash in the bank. You're right. It is no different than Mark Gordon's, energy matching funds, his slush fund. But yet we are so, the left has made the argument, no, we have to have this energy dominance fund. Okay, fine. Tell me what exactly that means. What is energy dominance? What is the plan? What are you going to do? If the plan is just to cut a big check and hand it to a big energy company, that's not energy dominance. That's handing over our cash to somebody that doesn't need it.
I agree. I would say that what we have to do is push back on the argument that businesses will not do business in Wyoming unless they've got cash handed to them from the taxpayers. And to be honest with you, you know that the majority of our tax revenue comes from coal, oil, and gas. And so if we're going to support those industries and make them last longer so that we've got good revenue streams in the future, we have got to not allow those funds to be funneled into other energy sources that are competing with them. For instance, green energy of solar and wind, and as well nuclear for that matter. Nuclear needs to stand on its own or with federal help, but the state tax dollars that are collected from coal, oil, and gas should not be funding their own competition. I certainly wouldn't want to be in a market where, the businesses that I'm in, I have to compete against a government-funded business, and that's the road we're headed down.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, John. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to visit with me this morning. Why don't you take a couple minutes, give me your elevator pitch, and then tell my viewers if they want to get a hold of you, how to do that.
Well, I'll start with the last thing first. To get a hold of me, call me at 307-670-1130, 307-670-1130. I'm also on Facebook, and you can email me at jhnbear@gmail.com. I want to tell the people that we have gotten them more money in their pockets. And why did we do that? Because number one, we believe that they can spend that money better than the government can. And what do I mean by how much money we put in their pockets? 25% of their property taxes for homeowners. That's significant. For most homeowners, that's anywhere from $700 to $1,500 in your pocket. And we just believe that you're better at spending that money than the government is. I worked hard to champion the SAVE Act for Wyoming, which means that only citizens can vote in Wyoming. And I think we need to continue working on more tax relief and more election integrity. But we've also championed, and myself as well, your Second Amendment rights and protecting those. My opponent hasn't even mentioned the Second Amendment. So as a Republican candidate, I'm concerned about where he might stand on the Second Amendment. No one has to worry about that with me. I am endorsed by the Gun Owners of America and the National Rifle Association, and I'll always fight for people's Second Amendment rights. It's the only amendment that protects the other amendments, all of our rights, which are God-given, not given by government. And so I'll always champion the rights of the people and make sure that those are protected.
All right, John, I appreciate it, my friend. I'm sure we'll be talking again before Election Day, maybe. So keep me updated, and thanks for joining. We're going to take a break,
you.
and when we come back, we'll finish up the program. The following ad was paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
This is Brent Bean, a Republican for governor. Wyoming families know what matters: law enforcement, emergency services, and supporting strong schools, agriculture, and energy production. But state government keeps growing while priorities fight for resources. That has to change. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending and priority problem. Vote for me on August 18th, and I'll put Wyoming priorities first. I'll return taxes to you, the taxpayer, and make Wyoming number one. Paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for any type of building for your property, you need to call Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the best in metal building construction, and they've been doing it longer than anybody else around. So it doesn't matter if it's a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger, like a roping arena or maybe a giant warehouse for your business. The two guys you need to call first are Marcos and Jesse. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out on their website, mortonbuildings.com. Live, burning through a Tuesday morning. Thank you for joining me. So we just had John Bear on, and I think that there's a number of things in that conversation that are incredibly important. And, you know, we hear a lot about taxes because, I mean, let's be honest, the majority of what government does is they either tax the bejesus out of you and then use that money to go to things that you wouldn't buy yourself, or the other side tries to reduce your taxes. And I don't think that we can overstate how important the gains that we've made in the legislature have been. The 25% reduction, the 50% long-term homeowners thing, and the 50% reduction initiative. Now, that part wasn't government. In fact, government fought that tooth and nail.
Government.
It was in spite of government. But still, those are so important to Wyoming citizens that I don't think that we can overstate it.
Yeah, I just want to mention I have a really tangible experience here with this 25% tax. I get a check in the mail from my mortgage company.
What?
$796. And it said your escrow has grown too large. And in addition to sending you back this cash, because taxes were lower, so they didn't need it as much, your monthly payment is going to go down $133.
Holy crap.
So, you know, it's not huge money, but
I don't know, $133 in my world.
It's just pushing $1,000 cash right off the bat. and then another $130 a month. Well, that'll allow me to.
No, don't mention that. Don't mention that. We'll have to then go on another boating trip if you do that.
Yeah.
But those things happen in spite of government. Okay, when government gets involved in any of this, whether it's housing or any of it.
Yeah, this happened because of the Freedom Caucus.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's in spite of government, not because of government. And when you create things like the Wyoming Business Council and you fund hundreds of millions of dollars into them that go to them picking winners and losers, well, that money has to come from somewhere. And the state of Wyoming does not have a printing press in the basement of the Capitol, though I think that they believe that they do. They don't print money; they have to steal it from you. And let me define that for a minute. I got hammered on social media the other day because I said that taxation was theft. Any amount of taxes over and above what is absolutely necessary for the necessary functions of government,
constitutional functions,
the constitutional functions of government, is legalized larceny. If you are taking more than you need, that's stealing from the taxpayer. Now, I think that we have way too many government programs. Citizen-funded, government-mandated programs is a better way to put it. But those aren't necessary, right? The only necessary functions of government it's actually a pretty small list. Infrastructure, water, sewer, roads. I like riding on nice, smooth roads. I don't like my house being broken into. Not that that's a good idea to even try. I'm just throwing that out there. But we need to have police, right? We got to prosecute criminals. Fire. If my neighbor's house catches on fire, I want the fire department showing up so my house doesn't burn down. And we'll even throw in some cash for administration. But beyond those few things, government, it's not government's job. But we have a legislature that up until 2 years ago was run by the redcoats. The insiders, the corporate welfare insiders that funneled your taxpayer dollars every imaginable way that they could think of to grow the size of government. And now we've got this big giant behemoth that's spending $11.5 billion every 2 years.
It's even more insidious than that as I see it. And this is a concept I've been working on. We hear a lot about autonomous cars. We hear a lot about AI. You and I have talked about AI that they told it to shut itself down, and then it lied and said it did when it didn't.
Yep.
And there is the kind of Frankenstein monster idea in this, where you create something that is bigger and more powerful than you, that is able to perpetuate itself and gets out of hand. It is appropriate for Wyoming's government to have a certain amount of cash in hand.
Yes.
As a reserve.
Yes, absolutely.
Now the boasting is we've got so much cash on hand that is taxation that has been collected over and above the constitutional needs of government. We've got so much cash on hand that now the interest off of that supports 1/3 of the state, the income. Okay, at what point does a government that becomes self-sustaining and doesn't depend on the taxpayer anymore, when does that government become dangerous? And I say we're already there.
Well, okay, so let me correct you on one thing. There will never be a time when government says, we're not going to tax you. It doesn't matter how much is in the bank.
But they're not dependent on that money, and that's my only point.
Now, that's a fair point.
That's my only point. We no longer have the ability to stop them and shut them down because they can perpetuate themselves, whatever. They're not dependent upon us. And that becomes an insidious problem.
Now, Ken, like if you put together all of the coffee cans, all the trust funds, the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, all of it, how much cash are we talking?
Well, there's about $33 billion, but some of those monies are allocated to pay people's retirements.
Sure.
Okay, we made a contract with them.
Right.
When it's all said and done, about half of that, somewhere around $14-15 billion, is extra cash.
Okay, so think about this. Let's just say it's $14 billion. The budget that was passed this last legislative session was $9.5 billion, and you add on top of it some change. And I think it ended up being like 11 and a half or 10 or something like
Call
that.
it 11.
We'll call it 11. So we have enough cash in the bank, not sequestered, to run the state of Wyoming with all of its pieces and parts without $1 of tax money.
Yes.
Think about that for a minute, ladies and gentlemen, that we could run all the levers of government for an entire year without taxing you $1 more. And yet, I don't think that I've heard anybody outside of the Freedom Caucus or the conservatives, Freedom Caucus and conservatives, say that, hey, maybe we should look at that.
But when you try to stem that flow of revenue and just turn it down a little bit, all hell's going to break loose. People are going to die in the streets, starving kids out there, everything else, because everybody's dependent upon government.
Yeah.
That's something we don't want.
All right, let me give you an example of what happens when you have liberals in charge and they have so much money that they just don't know what to do with it. I mean, a friend of mine used to call it stupid money. He's a plumber, and he during the summer was always his busy season, and he'd work like 30 hours overtime, 30 hours overtime every week. And when those checks started rolling in, he would call it stupid money. Just way too much money way more than what he needed to pay his bills. And so we ended up doing really dumb stuff with it. So when government has that, we pass stupid bills like we're going to build houses. And we, the government, are going to pay, because we have this housing shortage, we're going to pay people to go out and build houses. Now, keep in mind that we have people who are not part of government who could do that very thing if government got out of the way. But here's from Fox News. Senators...
Not only could they do that very thing, but they could make a handsome living doing it.
Yes, they could. A buttload of cash. From Fox News, senators celebrate bipartisan housing bill becoming law despite Trump's refusal to sign. So there's a couple of problems here. And I quote, "The bipartisan housing bill becomes law without Trump's signature. The president refused to sign the housing bill after Congress did not pass a bill that would affect voting, the SAVE Act." All right, so if the president does not sign a bill and does not veto it, it becomes law. All right, so the President Trump, and this is a point where even Republicans, even conservatives that we love and we think are doing a great job, even they make really, really, really dumb decisions. Listen to this one. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, both sides, celebrated the landmark bipartisan housing bill becoming law overnight Saturday, despite President Donald Trump's refusal to sign it. The 21st Century Road and Housing Act. Doesn't that sound so great, Ken? It aims to address the country's housing shortage by increasing the supply of homes and overall home ownership. The legislation loosens regulations to encourage housing construction and limits Wall Street investors from buying homes that could go to families instead. It passed the Senate 85-5, and in the House, it passed 358-32, both veto-proof majorities. Trump said he was refusing to sign it because of the Save America Act. The voting bill has been flatly rejected by Democrats, and it's not going anywhere right now. Since the president didn't sign it, let's see here. I'm just trying to find. All right, so here's what they say about it. The 21st Century Road to Housing Act will help more Americans plant roots, build stability, and pass opportunity on to the next generation. Mike Rounds of South Dakota praised the bill. Now, while some Republicans did not mention or comment on Trump's refusal to sign it, some Democrats said the president slow-walked delivering these pro-bipartisan cost-saving measures to voters by refusing to sign it. Bottom line, my friends, housing is not the role of government. If you are going to decrease regulations, great. If you are going to get involved in the housing market, bad move. We've already done that. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Let me take you all the way back to 1918. The United States Housing Corporation. This was a fantastic idea during the Woodrow Wilson, I hate that guy, administration. Now here's what the United States Housing Corporation was. It was a federal agency that was created during World War I to provide housing for wartime production workers near arsenals and shipyards. The truth is, in your small Wyoming town, you may have a house that was built by the United States Housing Corporation. With a massive wartime shipbuilding program underway, tens of thousands of workers flooded into communities surrounding shipyards. We had a housing crisis. Oh no! What would we ever do? Large amounts of new housing needed to be quickly constructed in order to carry out the war effort. However, rather than approaching the problem as one of temporary housing, the government saw an opportunity to create quality neighborhoods that would become integrated into the physical and social fabric of our surroundings. So we're building houses. Here's the problem with it. Listen to this part. The post-World War I investigation into the United States Housing Corporation was driven by the Senate Committee on Public Buildings and Grounds. They found a whole bunch of problems with this, including gross extravagance and excessive spending. The committee concluded that the USHC built homes that were far too luxurious and permanent for temporary wartime needs. Investigators argued that simpler temporary military-style barracks and cheaper structures would have worked. There were huge cost infractions. The agency relied heavily on cost plus fixed fee contracts. Congress found that the structure incentivized private contractors to artificially inflate material and labor costs. Why would they do that? Oh, because you're dealing with somebody that has an unlimited checkbook. Why not inflate the prices? This is the same sort of thing that creates the $500 hammer that we're also fond of, or the $2,000 toilet seat that our military paid for many years. There was management failures. A major point of criticism was the agency's behavior after the November 1918 armistice. The committee found that instead of immediately halting construction, the USHC allowed multiple costly projects to continue for months, draining public funds. There was in this one, I'm positive that you're going to be surprised at this next part. I know that you never would have seen this coming. Inadequate accounting controls. What? You mean there wasn't anybody there doing the books?
What surprises me is there was, inadequate implies there must have been something.
Auditors noted a severe lack of centralized oversight, sloppy bookkeeping, and a failure to properly track building materials, which led to widespread waste across multiple projects. The truth is, my friends, that anytime, and this is the primary reason why government doesn't need to be involved in this stuff, because it always leads to graft. Because you have a giant program that is way too big for any one person to manage, and so there's so much opportunity for a pallet of building supplies to be delivered over here when it was supposed to be delivered right over there. And huge cost overruns. It is a perfect example of what happens when you get government involved. And President Trump allowed something similar. Now, granted, it's just, tax breaks, and we're not actually sending people out to build homes. Same sort of thing, though. Government is involved in housing, and it always creates the same thing.
This idea needs to be at the forefront of everybody's mind. Anything that government provides, it can take away.
Yes.
And if government is providing your food, they're providing your health care, if they're providing you shelter, and something happens, where are you?
No, you're going to do this, or you're not going to get medical treatment.
Yeah.
You're going to do this, or you're not going
you
to
become subservient to government, and that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. We've created this behemoth that no longer is under our control. We have completely given up our freedoms to government in a false assurance of safety. Not there.
If you hear a candidate utter the phrase affordable housing, vote against them. There is no such thing as affordable housing or government housing or anything about that. Is not the job of government, period, end of sentence. It is not the proper role of government. It is the role of the free market.
Yeah. In fact, government exacerbates the situation. I read an article just the other day. The National Home Builders Association estimates that compliance with regulation adds another 130,000 plus to the cost of every new home.
If a company comes to your community and they say, we need, I don't know, 2,000 more workers, and there isn't housing for those 2,000 more workers, why is it that that company immediately goes to government? Why?
Because they'll get the money.
Because they'll get the money.
Yeah, they won't have to do it themselves.
Because they know that government, well, yeah, we got to have all these workers, jobs.
Yeah, what did they used to do? How many of these, I keep thinking of Jibo, which is, it's a little mine area that was there, and they put all these little cracker box houses up there and put employees into there. And then when the mine went away, they moved them all in and put 2 or 3 of them together to make houses.
Exactly.
But, yeah, companies used to provide for their own, and for the same reasons that government now wants to, because I owe my soul to the company store.
Uh-huh.
You know, I can't leave. I can't make it on my own. And government figured that out. Now they want to be the sugar daddy.
Yes. And so the reason why a company runs to the city council or runs to the county commissioner is because they know that those politicians will vote for jobs and say, well, look at all the jobs I've created. This has been great. And they know that they will get the money. The truth is, if government were to just say, you know, that's not really my job. It's kind of your job to be able to make sure that your workers have a place to live. You know what will happen? Companies will make a place for their workers to live. Gone are the days of man camps. Now, oil and gas companies, okay, that's different. Okay, so when you're drilling a giant well out in the middle of nowhere, yeah, it makes sense to build a man camp for your people. But it doesn't matter whether it's out in the middle of nowhere or if it's right downtown. If it's economically feasible for a company, I mean, if they're in the black, they absolutely will build or purchase or in some way provide for their employees. And they should. It's not the role of government.
Great example of that is right here in both Sheridan and Johnson counties. There's a gentleman that owns fast food restaurants in both counties.
Yeah.
Someone trying to live on a fast food wage
can't do it.
Can't do very well. And so what did he do? He went and he bought a number of houses, and certain employee benefits kick in, and you are able to go live in some of his housing. There are ways.
When I worked for the oil and gas company in Virginia, we'd go to a different state, and we were in multiple states. And you know, number one on the list is find the employees. Number 2, how do we house them? And so you had 2 choices. You could either put them up in a motel room and do it that way, or you could cut that cost in about half, give a little bit more on the per diem, and go rent a house. And so that's what we would do. We would go to whichever community that we were working in, building a pipeline in. We'd go find a big house, and we'd just rent it. And then we'd give our workers a little bit more on their per diem, and so they could buy their own stuff. You know, we bought a truckload of beds, just like twin beds, and hauled them up there. It was in West Virginia. It was the first place we did this. Rented a big house, put the beds in there, and said, there you go, fellas. The rest of it is up to you. By the way, we're going to give you an extra $100 a day on your per diem. See, we provided the housing. We didn't run to government to say, even though the guy that, this is kind of an irony, the guy that owned that company was a radical Democrat. He was actually friends with Barack Obama. But anyway, all right, I can already see the Facebook comments now. David, why were you working for a Democrat? Because he paid me a heck of a lot of money to do it. Anyway, but business will provide for itself. That is not the role of government. And if you get government involved, business will always go to government. And what is that going to do to the price of housing? It's going to drive it through the roof. Because if you're selling your home, Ken, and you know that there's a shortage of houses, and you know that you can get whatever the asking price is, you're going to raise the rate, right? And the way our current tax system is if Ken sells his house for $2 million, well, it's going to affect the property values of everybody else around him, and it drives costs up. And the main culprit in all of that is government. And if we do not get away from it, you're not going to stop this whole thing. So, my friends, we've pretty much burned up another busy broadcast hour, 2 hours on the program. So just a couple of minutes. So tonight, if you're around Sheridan at the Ramada Inn at 6 o'clock, the Sheridan County Republican Party legislative debates. We're going to have debates between all of the legislative candidates, providing that they all show up. So House District 29, House District 30, House District 40, House District 51, and Senate District 21. It'll also be live streamed on all of the Cowboy State Politics platforms. And so if you can't make it down to the debate, you can always watch it. YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, all of those. And if you happen to be in Casper, no, not yet. If you happen to be in Casper on Thursday, the High Plains Republican primary debate at the Rialto Theater. There's no cost to attend it. However, it's first come, first serve. So once that theater is full, not going to let anybody else in. The doors are going to open at 4:30. We've got a congressional debate, and then we will have a gubernatorial debate. And the people showing up to that. So for the governor's debate, it's Megan Degenfelder and Brent Bean. Big shocker, Eric Barlow is not showing up. For the congressional debate, Chuck Gray, Steve Freeze, Kevin Christensen, David Geralt, and Frank Chapman will be on the stage. And that's going to start 5:30 on Thursday. But for now, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns.
Are you sure?
I'm sure this time.
Okay.
I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good afternoon, my friends.